So next I'd like to go ahead and implement another fill type. And I think right now I have solid, I have iterate, and I have random. And what I'd like to do actually is mix between two colors. I think to start with, I'd like to mix between fill color 1 and fill color 2. So this would be the first square would get a value of the first color. The last square, the last time through the loop, would get the second color. And then everything in between would get some blend between the two. So I've changed my defaults here a little bit just to put these guys on rectangles, get rid of the strokes, and then just kind of line them up just so it's a little easier to see. And then what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and let's include a fill type blend down at the bottom. So underneath fill type up here in my JSON, I'm just going to add a new option, blend. Okay, they all turned black because I've added that as my default, which means it's defaulting here to blend, and there's no code for that. So let's add some code in. So I'm going to come down here into my main loop where I'm assigning fill, and down here is where I'm assigning the fills. I'm going to add in another conditional. And then have it do some stuff here. As it turns out, actually, this is really easy to do with a function call that's called mix. So mix is so super useful. What it does is you give it a start value. Let's go ahead and just go through the arguments real quick. And then an end value. And then like a controller. So the controller just goes between 0 and 1. So if you give it a value of 0, it'll return the start value. If you get a value of 1, I'll give it the end value. And then everything in between will mix between the two different values. So, if you think of this just with scalar values, this is really simple to understand. If this start value, say, was 0 and this end value was 10, then 0.5 here would return 5. Obviously you could do that with multiplication, but these two values could be any values. But this gets really powerful, actually, because this will take in vec2, vec3, and vec4. It'll take in vector types. So you can actually just go ahead, instead of these being values, you can just pass in a color. And it'll mix between the two different colors based on one float value. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So instead of mixing just this color, actually I already have, handily enough, this array we made earlier, colors. And so I just need to refer to colors 0 and colors 1 to return this color and this color where they're stored in the array. So let's just say colors 0 and colors 1. Now those are vec4s, and just like up here I needed to pull out the colors and then its index from the array and then the RGB, so I need to do that too down here. Okay, so now what should come here? Well, let's just test it with 0. And I save, and nothing happens because of course I need to assign it to fill. And we get all greens. And now let's test it with 1, and I get all purples. Great. So what I need is something that'll just go in between here every time through the loop. And of course, we've already created our index, our iterator variable. So this is just always going to return a value between 0 and 1, which is normalized through the iterations. So if we just type in index here, it's just as simple as that. That's super powerful, really easy to use, and gives you an indication of this this really powerful function called mix, which you should definitely be familiar with, because you can mix all kinds of things. You could maybe even mix between, let's say, a circle and a rectangle, because remember, after all, these are just two float values coming in. So if you wanted to change the shape over time, you'd use mix. And if you want to change colors over time, you can mix them together. So what I'd like to do next now is, in addition to just having a simple blend between these two colors, I think it'd be pretty nice if we could have blending 2 colors, blending 3 colors, blending 4 colors, and blending 5 colors together. That's going to introduce a little bit more sophistication to this code, because right now we could simply just say 1 and 2, say. But this is just two values, so if we want to do 0 and 2, this is going to grab this value and then skip the purple value and just go to that orange value. Now that might be something you want, like let's say you only want to blend between two colors, but if I want to build a gradient from all these different colors, I'm going to need some more complex code. So let's do that next. So for our next section, I want to be able to blend all of these colors in my color palette together and make a nice gradient with multiple knots out here. So for this, the first thing I'm going to do is come in here and maybe I'll add some options for that. And I think if I can get it working with all 5 maybe first, then I can populate it with the rest. So I'm going to come in here and let's say, and my blend type, instead of blend, let's call this blend 2. And then let's do blend 5. And then I'll have a blend 3 and blend 4 eventually. So right now I've got blend 2, and blend 2 I think is fine with this simple mix call that we've got down here in our fill assignment for now. But then if we think about this next problem, fill type equals 4, fill is equal to what? Okay, so sometimes when I'm writing a function, and I'm going to let you guys know, first actually I just put in the values that I want, and I kind of reverse engineered this function based on what I needed. So I didn't start thinking procedurally at first. I just started thinking about what I wanted the actual values to be. And let me just go ahead and copy that line there. I mean, here's the deal, right? Sometimes we want these things to be colors 0 through colors 0 to 1, 0 to 2, 1 to 2, 3 to 2. So, copy, paste. There we go. Like sometimes we want this from 0 to 1, but sometimes we would want this from 1 to 2. And I'm going to come in here and make sure that my default fill type is default to 4. There we go. So that we're going from red to orange here now. So really what I need is a way to kind of control between those numbers, right? So if I go 0 to 1, that's going to return these two. And if I do 1 to 2, that will return those two. But really what I want to say is like, hey, if index is less than 0.5, do the first thing. This would be in the case of 2. Else if index, just else, give me 2 other values. These two, 1 and 2. Get the idea. Let me make sure my curly brackets are where they need to be. So it'd be like, okay, and there we go. We can see kind of splitting here. But you notice this code isn't quite right either. Like it's giving me from green to purple, but this is still green, and then this is still purple over there. And then it hits that break there of 0.5, and then it just starts mixing kind of on top of itself, right? Like that's still 0. So this index value is not quite correct. And this makes a lot of sense if you think about it. This is going from 0 to 0.5, and this is going from 0.5 to 1. But really we want this, in the time it takes to get from this side of the screen to the middle, you want that going from 0 to 1. And then you want it going from 0 to 1 again, right here. So, you could certainly say, what could you say? Index times 0.5, or index times 2.0. And then this is index times 2.0. But then that's not quite right either. That's because we need to offset. We would need to offset this. Well, this is definitely not what we want. I kind of got the feeling for what we need. We need this to go from 0 to 1. And then we need this to go from 0 to 1. And actually, I'm just kind of making the assumption that this is split in half. This is just trying to get the first 3 values. we're going to need to divide this number between how many of these values that we have. So really, instead of this being 0.5, this would be what? Like 0.25 if I had 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then from there on, I'm going to have to mentally do the math. So every time you find yourself maybe kind of doing the math, you know that that's not quite right. The computer should definitely be doing the math. So it seems to me that we're going to need just a variable, right? One that's like color count. So this should return the total number of these colors. So like if color count is equal to 5.0, say 5 colors, then this should just be 1 divided by the color count. There we go. So I don't have to manually do that math. If the color count was just 2, let's say there's 2 colors, right? 1 divided by 2 would give us 0.5. Okay, so that seems like a good place to start. And then, let's see, this, I observed too, this is just kind of counting up too, right? This is going 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2 to 3, and so on and so forth. So it seems to me that we're already counting, right? We're already normalizing this value from 0 to 1, right? Our index is already a value between 0 and 1, 0, 0 to 1, right? So if we just multiplied that by a number, like say 3, or by, of course, the color count, then that would return, like, you know, then 1 would be equal to 5. And then if we could get rid of all the decimals, we could get these whole numbers. We need to cast this, remember, this needs to be an integer, so we need to cast this as an int. So how can we do that? Well, so index, if we just said index times the color count, and then we wrap that inside something called a floor, that would round it down. So if this is maybe getting a little like abstract, let's go over to do what I always do, which is come over here to Desmos and see if we can kind of visualize this in our head. Okay, so I'm going to start with x, as we always do, right? And this, let's just call this x value. This could also be, you know, I for index. It's always going from 0 to 1. This is our iteration. It counts up between 0 and 1. And what we need to do is we need to break this into different pieces. It needs to be broken into different pieces depending on how many our total color count is. 0, 1, you know, whatever. We're always going to have a minimum of 2, right? Because I always want to mix between 2 colors. 2, 3, 4, and 5. So one thing we can do is actually call floor on x. And what floor does is actually just throws away the decimals. And this already is looking pretty useful. Look at this. If you want to make stair steps, this is sometimes called just a stair step function. And this is really simple to understand what it's doing, right? It's just between 0 and 1. Basically, it's rounding down. Cool. And right now, it's, you know, 3, it's rounding down to 3. But if we were to multiply this and scale it in by our total number, then we could scale this between 0 and 1 instead of 0 and 3. So between 0 and 1, we now have 3 equal bits. 0, 1, and 2. And that second number you see there, that's what we're looking for. That's going to be the index value of our array. And then I also just, you know, I just did a little bit of error correction in here, or not really error correction, but just some more shaping to make sure that it never goes below 0, and to make sure that it never goes above the count, which I'm saying in this case is 3. So that count, we could take that count and we could say 4 and 4, and this would just increment it into more chunks. And I think ultimately we want, of course, is 5 and 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 even chunks. That would return 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0, which would correspond with the index placements of our array. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Yeah, so this formula, this is what we want. So let's see if we can implement it. So instead of this right here, what we really want that to be is something that let's call step value. Float step val. Step value is equal to, and then we'll copy that other stuff we wrote over there. We need the floor of, instead of x, of course, this is the index coming in. Exact same thing. And then that index, I need to multiply that by color count. Remember, that's here, index times color count inside the floor. And then if I want to clamp it, I can using min and max. We'll just leave it maybe like that for now. Okay, so this whole number here then can be replaced, of course, by our step value. And this one could also be our step value plus 1. Great. So that's just step value and step value plus 1. Now this condition that's happening here, we don't need that anymore because remember, we were only testing index to see which number should come in here. And now that we've done it procedurally, I think we can get rid of that whole condition. So that gives us mixed colors step value plus 1. And that throws an error because these need to be integers. I made a float up there. So let's cast them as an int. And that should give me my 0 to 1, 1 to 2, etc. And I'm adding 1, so let's add 1.0 so that I'm adding a float. There we go, that's returning no errors. So that's what I'm looking for. Okay. Now this index times 2, this we also, I think, are going to want to do something a little more fancy. So what I want to do is kind of like map this value between 0 and 1 depending on an input. And for this, and you can see we're getting kind of close here already, right? We're already going 0 to 1, 1 to 2. But this is still not what we need. This is still not returning what we want. But actually, if I was to go 0 right now, we can already kind of see this working in action there a little bit. Like let's try increasing the color count and see if it returns more colors. It does. Hey, that's cool. And actually, you know, maybe if you want a mode for this, this could just be a distribute mode. So if you wanted to evenly distribute these colors, we basically built that as a type as well. What the heck? Let's keep it. That's pretty cool. So instead of blend 2, let's keep it. Let's put a distribute in there. Let's come in here while we're here. I was not planning on doing this. Well, let's do it anyway. Distribute. Cool. 5, 0, 1, 2, 3. So let's say 3 is distribute, and then we'll do our blends right down here. Okay. That was 3. Let's get rid of that 3. If fill type is 3, then we'll do this distribution thing. And maybe for now we'll just have distribute be distributing all of the colors. And then maybe we can bring built-in controls for that. I can see how maybe instead of these being drop downs, I'm going to actually want these to maybe blend, and then it has like, you know, a slider underneath. I can already foresee that being something I might need. And then let's copy all this code. And let's bring it down here. And if that's 4, of course we have a color count of 2. And then this would just be index. And it's giving me a premature end of file, which means I'm missing a curly bracket somewhere. There it is. Okay. All right. So notice I'm copying and pasting this, which indicates to me that probably I need to bring this whole thing to a function. So I've got my distribution mode, and I've got my blend 2 and my blend 5. I think actually all of this is just going to become a mode called blend. This is the thing I want to build a mapper for. So let's do that next.